All right, NFL Combine all wrapped up. Now the Giants can look ahead to free agency before April's draft. So we're going to talk draft, some potential cap casualties, and all of the major reports coming out of Combine Week and how they could affect the Giants with our Giants beat writer for the Post, Paul Schwartz. We'll call this a post-Combine Blue Rush, Paul. Welcome back, man. I guess real quick, like just how was the Combine? Was it anything and everything that you thought it would be?
Well, it was there in Indianapolis, and I'm glad I could make it because, as you remember,
Yep.
last week, big snowstorm Sunday night into Monday. I was supposed to leave Monday, so I switched the flight and was able to get out on Sunday. Happily, never been more happy to touch down in the great city of Indianapolis because that meant I made it to the Combine. And look, we can joke about the Combine, but it is a very, very valuable place to be at. Not only getting a firsthand look at some of the prospects, just standing at the podium and listening to a guy for 10 minutes gives me vibes, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not right. But I look back at some of the podiums I stood by over the years, and sometimes those vibes really prove correct. So I like doing that with these prospects. Obviously, we get to speak with Joe Schoen. We get to speak with John Harbaugh. We get to go out to dinner and, in the highways and byways and alleyways and passageways of downtown Indianapolis. There's a lot of whispering going on, a lot of agents meeting with teams and talking about free agency. So there's a lot going on. It's important to be there. And Brandon, I can tell you, definitely a different vibe with John Harbaugh as the head coach. You can sense it from the prospects when they talk about meeting with the Giants, and they all say how impressed and excited they were to meet John Harbaugh. No disrespect to the other coaches the Giants have had, but John Harbaugh is John Harbaugh, and he resonates with young players. He resonates with veterans, and he resonates with GMs and people who are all assembled at the Combine in Indianapolis. So definitely a different vibe this year.
All right, let's talk about some of these prospects because when we saw a lot of these videos, a lot of these guys are asked, what would they bring to the Giants, whether it be the Giants offense or the defense? And what was it like, or that interview like, or meeting John Harbaugh? And every single one of these guys had nothing but great things to say about Harbaugh. And I feel like a lot of these guys impressed the Giants brass as well because they backed up their tape with their measurements and a lot of their testing numbers. Now, again, like you said, you spoke to a lot of people behind the scenes. So who do you think kind of impressed the Giants that you're kind of surprised about, that you weren't really taking you didn't really have an eye on at first, but after talking to people behind the scenes and seeing and talking with that prospect, that you think that the Giants are kind of taking an eye at this kid come draft day?
Well, I'd put it this way. I didn't go into last week thinking, I think inside linebacker is a spot they're going to target really early. I know they want to change their inside linebackers. We'll talk about that when we talk about free agency. But look, I mean, there's no secret that Sonny Styles from Ohio State was the talk of the Combine, and the Giants had him in. I was standing around his podium, and I mean, I don't know if I was more ready to have the Giants take him at number 5 or to vote for him from some public office. I mean, I don't like when, Brandon, I don't know about you, when people say he said all the right things, it kind of sounds a little phony, right? Like
Yep.
he said all the right things, but not everything that he's feeling. I don't feel that at all with Sonny Styles. I mean, the guy is, he's very eloquent. He's very poised. Very classy. He's just, he's a great looking athlete. And then, I talked to him, and then a couple of days later, he goes to work out and he just blows it up. I mean, blows it up. This guy was a safety at Ohio State. They said, we need to move you to linebacker. The Giants had him at 6'4". He's listed at 6'5". I think he measured in right around 6'5". He's about 243 pounds. I mean, he looks like a supreme athlete. He is a supreme athlete. I mean, high jump, long jump, whatever, 40-yard dash. He's, setting all kinds of standards now. And he can play all 3 linebacker positions. He was mainly an outside guy this past year. As a senior, he went inside. And we talked a lot early in the week on Tuesday to Joe Schoen and especially John Harbaugh about the run defense. The Giants were 35th 31st against the run in 2025. Abysmal, right? It's been very bad for 4 or 5 years. I don't think they've been higher than about 25th. So Sonny Styles is a guy who can help stop the run. I wonder a little bit. We talk so much about versatility. He can do it all, and you get a little bit of those like Isaiah Simmons vibes. A little bit of like, okay, um, he can do it all, but can he do anything great? I think Sonny Styles is the kind of athlete, and he looks like a powerful guy. He did not miss one tackle this past season, not one. Now he missed a big one in the playoff game against Miami. Okay, that's like saying, Brandon, I scouted every one of your plays in college this past year, and you didn't have one drop. And then you had one drop in a playoff game. Okay, that's the exception. He doesn't miss tackles. So did I think going into this he'd be at play at 5? Maybe as an outside chance. After leaving Indianapolis, I think definitely in play. And I think it helps that the Jets traded away an edge rusher. And so the Jets more likely at number 2 will take an edge rusher with Brian Burns or with Kayvon Thibodeau and with Abdul Carter. If there's a really good edge rusher sitting there for the Giants, I think they would pass on him and trade down or just not take him. I don't think they're going to take another edge rusher. So Sonny Styles at 5, definitely in play.
Yeah, Sonny Styles, Paul, when you look at him, especially on tape, because, I watched Ohio State football. I knew who he was, but I was doing an Arvell Reese breakdown, going through his tape, and I just kept looking like, who is this Styles dude? He's all over the field. And I think Denard Wilson is going to love this kid. I feel like there's going to have to be some business decisions made. We'll talk about that to bring him in, to make sure they lock him up at 5. Because the one thing he does, like you said, does a lot of things well. He can blitz him, plays the run, agile, he's east-west. But the way he just plays in space in the passing game, he'll drop to a spot, play underneath some of the deeper intermediate routes. And then if you try and dump it off to like a running back with a check down or a shallow cross, he rallies and makes the tackle right there at the spot. I think, with Bobby, not Bobby, but Micah McFadden, him being hurt, I felt like the Giants missed a lot in that second level because Bobby Okereke was getting teamed up with Musau and, some of those other guys, and it just made a weird dynamic on that second level. And I felt like Bobby Okereke was having to wear too many hats, trying to do too much, and he kind of got, I don't want to say exposed, it was just he was out of place at times. So I think if Sonny Styles falls to 5, forget the Carnell tape, forget all of that. I think you got to bring this kid in because if you, we'll get into it, but this kid is this kid, what he looked like, his measurements and on the field, it definitely backed up his tape, and that kind of goes into the whole salary cap cuts and the potential casualties, because all throughout the weekend, I believe Saturday, Sunday, we saw the reports coming out of there that the Giants could potentially cut Bobby Okereke or even Devin Singletary. Those are 2 of the names we saw over the weekend. So because of Sonny Styles' legendary combine, do you now think that Bobby Okereke could potentially be a cap casualty? And did you hear any other potential names outside of those 2?
Yeah, look, as you know, Brandon, guys at this time of the year become contract numbers, right? Yes. It's like tackles, receptions, touchdowns. That's for the season. After the season, it's salary cap number. What can we save? I mean, not for Andrew Thomas, but for players who might be on that bubble. Bobby Okereke, if they cut him, the Giants will create $9 million in cap space. Devin Singletary, if the Giants cut him, will save about $5 million in cap space. That's $14 million right there. I would be surprised if both of those players are not cap casualties, okay? Because the Giants need money. And I believe that John Harbaugh wants to completely revamp the inside linebacker position. Okay, he wants big bodies. Darius Muasau is not a big body. I think Micah McFadden could come back on a small deal because he's coming off, major foot surgery. But I think that would be a role that he would get paid for, to be a guy who competes for a linebacker job and to play special teams. You know what I mean? And if he starts, that's great. But I don't think the Giants would go into the offseason and say, we want to re-sign Micah McFadden. We want to sign him to a 3-year deal and have him be one of our starting linebackers. I don't think that's the direction they'll go. So you'll need 2 or 3 new inside linebackers. Sonny Styles could certainly come into play. They could sign a guy, a mid-level guy in free agency. So I think Okereke and, let's say Devin Singletary, just there's no role for him. There's really no role for him. There was only a role last year because there were injuries. Tyrone Tracy, Cam Scatterbo. They will add another running back. So, in the draft or free agency, I don't think it's going to be Kenneth Walker for $15 million a year. I don't think that. And I don't think it's going to be Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame at number 5. I don't, although he's a great player and the Giants think he's a great player. I think taking a running back there at number 5 is just not going to be the way the Giants are going to go there. Other cap situations that I'm monitoring, I think very likely the Giants will have 2 new kickers next year, a new kicker and a new punter. I think that is something that probably will happen. If, Graham Gano has been an incredibly reliable, steady kicker, but he's just been too injury prone and he's getting up there in age. The Giants would save about $4.5 million if they cut Graham Gano. And I don't think that don't forget, John Harbaugh was a special teams coordinator for years with the Eagles, right? And special teams is near and dear to his heart. I don't think Jamie Gillen is what he's looking for as a punter. If they would cut Jamie Gillen, they'd save around $3 million. So that's, that's $7.5 million savings on, kicker and a punter. And then they, maybe they go with Ben Sauls. I heard he has some advocates in the building to be a guy who will compete for a job at kicker. He was, I think, 8 for 8 last year, the lefty. Not ideal to have a lefty kicker because it's just not ideal for a lot of reasons, for the holder, for the snapper, and for if you bring another kicker in, then everyone's got to switch it around. But I think there will be competition, but I think Ben Sauls will be given a chance. And I think there'll be a new punter next year as well.
You know how you talk about how John Harbaugh can kind of switch things up when it comes to the linebacker structure. Once bigger linebackers in there, you mentioned Micah McFadden possibly staying on a lesser of a deal. What about the safety structure? Because defensive coordinator Denard Wilson has a secondary background. I know Javon Holland's back there, Tyler Nubin's back there. But if Caleb Downs is floating at number 5, do you see Harbaugh and these guys kind of making a play on another Ohio State player?
I tell you one thing. We can talk about Ohio State players and take up a whole podcast, right? Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles. I mean, how did they ever give up a first down? I mean, those 3 guys are going to be top 10 picks from the same defense. They may be top 7 picks from the same defense. It's just incredible talent assembled there in Columbus, Ohio. Look, Caleb Downs is in play, I think. Now people say, well, wait a second. Doesn't Joe Schoen position, value and a safety? They didn't sign Xavier McKinney. That's in free agency, right? Now, the whole league does not value safeties the way they value other positions. The highest safety drafted since 2017 was number 7, I believe. Yes, number 6. Jamal Adams, number 6 by the Jets in 2017. Since then, no safety has ever gone that high. So if the Giants take Caleb Downs at 5, that is an outlier for what the league says a safety is worth and where he should be picked, okay? It's just not done very often in the top 5. Now you say, okay, is Caleb Downs a safety? Just a safety? Just a safety, right? Well, he's a very special player. His father, my first year covering the Giants was 1994. Okay, the Giants' 3rd round pick in 1994 was a tough running back from North Carolina State named Gary Downs.
Wow.
Okay, Gary Downs is Caleb Downs' father. He played in 94 for the Giants and he played in 96 for the Giants. Was not a big time player, but I remember them drafting him. You always kind of remember your first draft, right? Yep. You remember, who they drafted and things like that. So I remember Gary Downs, 94. So there's a connection there with the Giants, okay, long ago. And obviously we know, Josh Downs is a, good young, 2-year receiver for the Colts. So when I was around Caleb Downs, Downs is, I guess, you got to put the apostrophe there, podium, he was all business, he's wearing his glasses, which he doesn't wear in the games, obviously. He's 6 foot, 205 pounds. He looks like an ordinary player. But, it's interesting. These top players, when you get this massive media around, you get a lot of, did you meet with the Bucks? Did you meet with the did you meet with the Ravens? Did you meet with the Giants? What did you think of Harbaugh? What did you think of this guy? What did you think of that guy? And it becomes kind of like a carnival a little bit, and Caleb Downs, has a lot of information from his family about how to handle these interviews, right? So he comes up there to the podium right away and he says, okay, let me just say right away. And this wasn't militant, and it wasn't angry. It was just very factual. He said, I met with about a dozen teams, okay? And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to start entertaining questions about, did you meet with this team? Did you meet with that team? And what did you think? I met with about a dozen teams, and we'll just go from there. And now, did that stop people from asking him, did he meet with this team? Did he meet with that team? No, but it mitigated it, and it kind of put him in a power position right away. And it told me, this guy knows what it's like to be a pro, right? He has taken control of his situation. The interviews are very important. The media sessions are important to a certain extent. You can hurt yourself, I guess, if you come across like an idiot, or like, you're too cool for anything. And he came across very professional, talking about his family, talking about, he was asked, do you think you're the best defensive player in this draft? And he said, well, my tape, shows for itself what I am. And he basically said, do I think that any player here is better than me? No, I don't. He's saying he thinks he's the best defensive player in this draft. And you know what? He might be right. I don't think Giants would discount him because he's a safety. I would say marginally surprised if they took him at 5, but depending on who goes, if Sonny Styles is gone and Reese is gone, and just the defensive players coming off the board, if maybe Cor'dale Tate we'll talk about. I don't know if the Giants would take him at 5, but I think they're obviously very interested in getting a receiver. We'll see what happens in free agency. They need a running mate from Malik Neighbors. They just do. They don't have a number 2 receiver right now. But I would not be shocked at all if they took Caleb Downs. He's a terrific player. So he's a safety that you keep on the field all 3 downs. And Sonny Styles is a linebacker who you keep on the field all 3 downs. And I do think that John Harbaugh is not ready to throw away Tyler Nubin, but I believe he thinks he's more of a box defender. Okay, so if you would take a Caleb Downs, then you have, Javon Holland deep. You have Caleb Downs doing, a little bit of everything what you need. And you have Nubin, who can play in a specialized role more as a box defender. I think they like him there, this new defense against the run, just not deep, because he hasn't shown that ability right now at this point.
And that may not be a demotion for Nubin. That may be, someone identifying what your weaknesses are and trying to protect the player. Let's get you around the box, because how many times, Paul, last year did we see Nubin from, that safety position, 12 to 18 yards down the field, now come down, run the alley to try and make a tackle and take a bad angle. So now, instead of having him high trying to come low, let's already have you down in the box and kind of play that hybrid backer safety position, and let's get the best out of you. So it may be a good thing. We never know if Caleb Downs get drafted, how that will help the back end. So I mean, a lot of time we have between now and the draft, and obviously we've got free agency coming up. Who are the Giants going to re-sign? We've got Wan'dale Robinson, Cordell Flott, and Jermaine Illuminor. All these guys are up for new deals. There's a report out that the Titans could be going all the way in for Wan'dale Robinson and reuniting him with Brian Daboll. So who do you think the Giants are going to prioritize out of those 3, and who do you think they just let walk?
Well, John Harbaugh was asked, directly about those 3 players, and he said, I want them all back. And you can say, okay, that's just a coach saying he wants the players back, but they're not his players, right? They were the core of players of a team that has not won many games. So Harbaugh could look at those 3 guys and kind of off the cuff or say off the podium, look, they're decent players and they're good players, but we could, they lost a lot of games with them. So I'm not that interested in bringing them back. He said he wants them all back, those 3 guys, depending on where the money goes. Okay, I think if I would prioritize what the Giants think about them, I think it would be Flott number 1, because they don't have a cornerback, and I think they like him. I think John Harbaugh likes him. We'll see where that money goes, okay? Wan'dale Robinson, I think the Giants would be willing to pay like 13, 14 million a year. I really do. I think if it gets to 16, 17, 18, they will say goodbye to him. And I was told that Matt Nagy's offense, that small slot receiver, is not going to be a huge priority. Okay. It's nice. And, Wan'dale has shown he doesn't only have to be a slot guy, but Brian Daboll made that a priority. They drafted Wan'dale Robinson, who's about 5'8.5", right? We know how short he is. And Daboll said, no, I can make him work in my offense. And at times he did, and at times he didn't. The last 2 years more so he did. He finally cracked 1,000 yards. He finally cracked 10 yards a catch. He had 11 last year. So he did more things, right? And he stayed healthy. We know Wan'dale's not small. He's short. He's a stocky, strong guy. He's just short. So I think the Giants would take him back, but they still think they need a number 2 receiver, even if they re-sign him. So I don't know. I don't think they can go, break the bank for him. Good player, good guy. They want him back. But, Harbaugh has already said that I don't think that's a priority in the Matt Nagy offense. Okay, so you have to take that. Now, Jermaine Illuminor, the right tackle, Harbaugh knows him. He played for him in Baltimore. So I believe he thinks that Illuminor is a good player, kind of a mid-level right tackle. So if they can get him back for mid-level right tackle money, I think they'll do it. Jermaine Illuminor thinks he's one of the best right tackles in the league. If his money starts, moving up towards that, then I think the Giants will be out, because I think they think he's a good player and they want him back, but they're not going to. If his value is one of the best right tackles in the league and it's inching up to that, I think the Giants will fall out of that.
When I think of Wan'dale Robinson and how he could fit in this Matt Nagy offense, he's not he's not a speed guy like a McCole Hardman or a Kadarius Toney, So, yeah, I feel as though like a Brian Daboll is going to want to throw some little extra money at him to bring him in with a Cam Ward, to get Cam Ward some sort of safety blanket in those intermediate throws. Plus, Titans got a lot of money under that salary cap to throw around. So I think in Wan'dale is definitely maybe that casualty in terms of a guy that they don't re-sign. Lastly, Paul, because we're all talking about what this working dynamic was going to be like amongst the Giants brash. The Joe Schoen got a demotion. He said it with his chest. I am the captain still. I am still the GM. You got your first look into how the football and business operations are going to look like under John Harbaugh. So what did you see, learn, hear about this whole reporting structure with Joe Schoen, Don Aponte, who's the senior VP of football operations and strategy, and John Harbaugh?
I think it's going well so far, from both sides. I think it's going well. Look, Don Aponte was hired for the exact same role that Kevin Abrams held for 2 decades, okay? Now, she has experience with 3 NFL teams. She has extensive experience with the league. The thing is, the job right now is bigger, okay? It is just bigger under John Harbaugh. He has a bigger operation. Now, he has the same amount of coaches, 23, I believe it is, that Brian Daboll had. But did you see he hired last week 5 new analysts, okay?
Yep.
5 new analysts. These are newly created positions, okay? So I said, okay, let me see what the backgrounds is for these analysts. And all 5 of them are coaches. They're guys who were quarterbacks coaches, position coaches. They're not, salary guys, or they're not, IT guys. They're coaches. So I wondered, well, how are they analysts? Well, the Giants would call those guys coaches. Harbaugh calls them analysts, okay? He wants a big program, more analysts. Mike McDonald, right, who just won a Super Bowl as the second-year head coach of the Seahawks, he started in Baltimore for Harbaugh as one of these analysts. Now, McDonald was a coach, but they call them analysts, and they analyze and break down the game from a coach's point of view, and that gives the coaching staff more information. Harbaugh is an information guy. So, when we hear that Dawn Aponte is going to be in charge of, video is going to report to her, I think equipment, maybe grounds and things like that. Okay. It's all a bigger operation. He's hired more people for training staff, nutrition. Harbaugh was very adamant about, I want the weight room to be my weight room. Okay, I want my strength and conditioning guy. That's things he believes in, and that's things that, quite frankly, the Giants ownership had to, painstakingly go through to see how much are we giving him here? How much are we giving him? He wants this, 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 this. It is adding to the budget. Okay, 5 new analysts aren't coming for free. Those are new positions. So, he had to explain why it's important. So this is my way of saying that they took some of this off of Joe Schoen's plate. There's too much now. Dawn Aponte can do some of this because the job is bigger. Okay, the player procurement is still going to be, and John Harbaugh said it. It's mainly me and Joe. That's who does the draft. That's who picks the players. That's who decides in free agency. Now, Dawn Aponte is a great resource. And I think the Giants are going to do some different things cap-wise and contract-wise that they did in the past, because John Harbaugh looked at this and said, they're a little bit too old school here with how they design contracts and attack the salary cap. We can do things more efficiently and more state of the art. So Dawn Aponte is here for that. That's a positive, right? That's a positive. The Giants don't have great salary cap space this year. With a team that's bad, that's not great. John Harbaugh would rather have more cap space, and the Giants don't have a lot of draft picks, right? They don't have a 3rd-round pick. They traded that for Jackson Dart. That's fine. They don't have a 7th-round pick. The Giants could use more picks. When Joe Schoen came in, they had 11 picks, right? He created space for 11 picks, and those guys became, interesting players. The guys at the top, maybe not so much, but you add depth. Harbaugh would like more picks. He's frustrated they don't have more picks. He would like more salary cap space. So I think this, the reporting thing. Look, John Harbaugh had the gravitas and had the leverage to ask for it. That's what he wanted. That's what he got. That's what happens when you pay a guy $100 million. He gets that stuff. But I don't think him being here and this reporting structure has a whole lot to do with Joe Schoen and John Harbaugh working together to build this roster.
So basically, Paul, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to wrap this up. So basically, John Harbaugh just pulled the Giants into NFL football 2026. He just modernized.
Now, Joe Schoen did a lot of that. He did a lot of that. They were really behind in the times with technology and things. And I remember, John Harbaugh at his introductory press conference said, the Giants have this sports science staff here. We didn't even have that in Baltimore. Now, John Harbaugh thought that the training staff and things needed to be updated and enlarged and things like that. But yes, John Harbaugh came in and said, I have a system that worked in Baltimore for 18 years. They only won 1 Super Bowl there, but they were a consistently winning team. Yep. And a big program, and he wanted to bring that to the Giants. And he didn't hire 4 quarterbacks coaches, Now, his coaching staff has a ton of guys who've been head coaches or offensive coordinators, and that has to mesh. So he had to be able to bring in guys on the coaching staff for big salaries, and he was able to do that. And he just was able to say, look, I want to expand this, and it's going to cost more money, and we want more technology, and this is what I think we need to do to win. And if the Giants says, well, we kind of don't believe in that. We believe in the GM, and he kind of controls the roster, and he's the final say, and the head coach kind of falls in line. You know what? If we got Tom Coughlin on this podcast and we gave him some, it's sodium pentothal that makes people tell the truth. And he's even said it, without any nudging. He was frustrated by the structure. He thought that as a head coach, he wanted a little more say, or maybe a lot more say, but he and Ernie Accorsi worked it out. He and Jerry Reese worked it out. But did Tom Coughlin get everything he wanted with the Giants? No. And he was frustrated by that. And so John Harbaugh had the ability to get what he wanted, and he did. So yes, there will be changes, a lot of them behind the scenes that we don't notice, that will go into effect, that he feels will bring the Giants up to be more competitive. Because let's face it, they have not been competitive enough on the field the last decade.
Well, fans wanted change, and in the words of Sam Cooke, change gonna come. It's here now in the form of the $20 million a year man. All good reports coming out of Indianapolis with the Combine. Thank you, Paul, for hopping on with us, and thank you guys for watching our post-Combine Blue Rush.